Alright guys, now what we want to do is work on the create form so that we can add a to-do through the application. So we want to go to our controller, which is todos controller.php, and go to the create method, because that's what handles displaying the form. So we're just going to simply return a view, and that's going to be in the to-dos folder, and it's going to be called create. So let's save that and then go to the views folder, and we're going to go in the to-dos folder and create a new file called create.blade.php. Alright, and just to test it out, we'll just say test, click on that, and you can see that that's being loaded. Good. So we want to extend the layout just like every other template. And then we want our section, our content section. Alright, and then in here, let's go ahead and just put an H1, and we'll say create to do. Okay, let's go and reload, go to create, and there we go. Now we're going to use Laravel Collective, so we need to install that. So let's go over here. I'm going to keep the run watch running and just go to a new, we're going to say new console. Let me just navigate to that folder. htdocs and to-do list. Okay, so from here what I'm going to do is say composer require, and we're going to require Laravel collective /HTML, and then we're going to put a colon, and then the version, we're going to put this little arrow character, and then we want 5.4.0. Alright, so let's run that. And we're going to have to edit the providers, or add the providers. So we need to go to config and then app.php and go down to where the providers are, which are down towards the bottom right here. So let's see. We're going to go right here and say collective /HTML /HTML service provider :class. Alright, so that's the provider. We also want to add the aliases. There's two of them, so we're going to go down here. One is for form. So that's going to be collective HTML /form facade :class, and then we want one for HTML as well, so I'm just going to copy that and then change this to HTML, and that's going to come from the HTML facade. Okay, we can save that and close it up, and we should be able to use Laravel Collective now. I'm actually going to open up the Laravel Collective documentation. And we're going to go to HTML, or forms in HTML. And let's see, we already did this. So we want to open a form. Now, I'm actually not going to use URL, I'm going to use action, because I was having some issues with the using URL in this project. So what I'm going to do is change this to action, and we're going to point to todos controller at store. Okay, that's what we're submitting to, and then we need to define the method. Okay, the method is going to be post. Whoops. Alright. Now I want to use form components, which we didn't do in the last project. So let's go down. Let's see, right here, custom components. And then what we can do is create a form provider, and then we can do something like this. So we can give it an ID, I guess you could call it. So BS text, and then we set the view folder we want to use, and then the attributes or the variables that we want to use. All right, so we would create in the views component, in the views folder, a components folder, and then form, and then text.blade.php. So this BS text, this whole thing would basically stick this in, okay? And then we can provide default values if we want, and then in the actual create file, all we would have to do is something like this. All right, and I know that may be difficult to understand, but let me just show you. So I want to create a new provider in the app folder and then providers, and instead of just creating it manually, we can use Artisan. So let's go over here and let's say PHP Artisan, and then we're going to do make and then provider. All right, and then this is going to be form service provider, and we're going to run that, and you can see it created the file right here, and it basically gives us an empty shell, gives us the class and the boot and register. We're not going to worry about register, but boot is where we want to put this right here. So I'm actually going to copy this. All right, and then we're just going to paste that in right there. So this component will be able to take in a name, a value, and then an array of attributes. So let's go ahead and save that. And remember, this is BS text. So now we're going to go down to our views folder, and we're going to create a new folder called components. All right, and then inside there we'll create a folder called form, and then inside here we'll create a file, and let's see, what we're going to call this text.blade.php. Okay, so this is going to be for the text field. So over here in the documentation, this is where we would put this. Okay, so we'll copy that, paste it in. No, is that what we want? No, right here. Because we want it to be dynamic. It's going to be passed in the name, it's going to be passed in a value, and then an array of attributes. In this case, we're going to have a class with this label called control label, and then we'll have a class form control here. So let's go ahead and save that. And then the last thing we need to do to show it is to go to our create form, and then we can put this right here. Okay, and this should include the label and the input. So let's call this, what do we call this? Text. All right, and I'm calling it text because that's the name of the actual field. If we look in our to-dos table here, it has a text field. All right, so let's save that, and let's try and reload this. Let's see, BS text does not exist. All right, so we need to go back to our service provider, and it doesn't know what this is right here. So we have to say up here, use form. All right, let's try that. No, that's not it. BS text does not exist. So BS text is right here. And let's see, form BS text. Oh, you know what? We didn't add the provider. We created the form service provider, but we didn't add it to the config. So we need to go to app.php and go down to providers. And let's see, we're going to put this down here with the rest of the application service providers. So that'll be app/providers/form service provider class. All right, let's see if that works. There we go. All right, so now we're rendering our component, which is the text component. Now I want to create a component for the text area as well, because that's what's going to be used for the body. So to do that, we'll go back to our form service provider and just copy this. Okay, and then we'll just change it to BS text area. All right, and then just add text area right here. Save that, and then we'll go down to views components form and create a new file called text area.blade.php. And then what I'll do is just copy what we have in the text component, paste that in, and we're going to change this right here to text area. Actually, that should be a lowercase a. All right, text area. Same thing, we're going to pass in name, value, and attributes, and we're going to add the form control attribute as a default. So let's save that, and then we should be able to go back to our create form, and let's copy this, and that will be text area. Oh, I'm sorry, that will be body, and then this will be text, BS text area. And reload, and now we have the body. Okay, we also want the due date, and that's going to use a component form as well. So let's paste that in and then change this to due. There we go, and then we're going to need a submit button. I'm also going to make that a component. So let's go back to our form service provider, and we might as well just copy this. Okay, so I'm going to make this a little wider. Alright, so let's see, we're going to change this to BS submit. Okay, we'll change this right here to submit. And let's see, we're not going to need the name for this, so it's just going to be value. Value, and it's going to have a default of submit. And then we have our attributes. So let's save this, go back down to our form folder, create a new file called submit.blade.php. And let's see, in here all we have to do is add a submit button with Laravel Collective, which is right here. We don't need the echo because we're using the curly brace syntax. So I'm going to put this in a div without a class. And let's go ahead and put our curly braces, and then we'll paste that in. And let's change this to, actually this is going to be dynamic, so this is going to be the value and then the attributes. Alright, and then we'll go to our create form, and we should be able to just put in form BS submit, and then the value, which is going to be submit. Oh. What's this? Syntax error, unexpected semicolon. Submit.blade. Oh, that shouldn't be there. Alright, now it's just plain. I want to add the bootstrap class to that. So what we can do is go to the create form, and remember it can take optional attributes. So we're going to go right here and put in our array and say class. We want that to be btn and btn primary. And there we go. Alright, so our form's created. If we were to submit it, it's not going to do anything. It's going to, let's see, it's going to the store function just to test it out. Let's say return submitted. Okay, we'll go back and submit. Okay, so we know it's going to that function. So in the next video, we're going to take care of storing it in the database.